Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book Moonshine, Path of the Raven. No other than Mr. Max Shippee.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Nice to see you all. Thanks for having me on, Mr. Daniel. Appreciate it.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Max, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. My name is Max Shippee. I'm a new author, actually. I just had my first debut book called Moonshine, Path of the Raven. And there it is right there. It's funny, you have the first cover. We slightly changed the cover from the one that is on the audiobook. So if you pick up the actual book, the font is a little bit different. But it's the kind of story that wouldn't leave me alone, and I've had in my head for quite some time. So, yeah, that's kind of it. I've been in the Hollywood and acting world for quite some time, and when COVID kind of made everything slow down, I decided to start actually making my own stories, and this is the first one. So it took about 2 or 3 years to write. Yeah.
Awesome, Mr. Max. Thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. So, what is the main premise of Moonshine?
Sure. The main premise, the easiest, I could read you the back of the book, but
Please.
sure. 10-year-olds, what if at the edge of death you were given a new life? 12-year-old Sam is about to be chosen to carry on a magical tradition that's been hidden for centuries. When he crosses paths with the precocious Arabella, neither knows a series of events has been set in motion by strangers hundreds of miles away. A destiny will descend upon them in the form of a feral wolf, followed closely by a mighty woodsman and shapeshifter named John. Sam's journey will take him from loss to transformation as he is forced into a world where men are made through truth and myth, and women hold the mystical powers of nature. And then the following
Nice.
question is, yeah, will Sam be able to embrace his new role, or will destiny find him? Or, yeah, the easiest way to describe it, I've found kind of the even more shorthand way, is to Sam is a 12-year-old boy in about the year 1900 in the American South. He's a little black boy, and he discovers that he's the reincarnation of King Arthur. That's another kind of short way to describe it. So there's magic and witches and werewolves and other fun stuff like that. Is that the kind of stuff that you enjoy reading? Is fantasy stuff, or
Definitely.
yeah?
Definitely.
Well, that's good.
Similar with the Game of Thrones, like that.
Yeah, a little bit of that. So this is the first book in what will probably be three or four. I think four books total. Yeah.
So, what are the central characters in the story?
Sure. Central characters. Our primary character is a character named Sam. Like I said, he's a 12-year-old boy. He is lives in the south of the United States, in South Carolina. He's one of the main characters. The secondary character, I would say, would be that character named John, who is a lumberjack from the north. We find out that he has some magic within him, and he is sent south to find Sam, and he's sent south by a an old witch named Letha, who's of centuries and centuries old and very, very powerful and very knowledgeable. There's a kind of some tertiary characters that he has this precocious Arabella that we mentioned on the back of the book. She kind of finds some mischief as little girls do sometimes, and kind of is the impetus for his journey north in a lot of ways. And then as he travels north, he meets other characters as well. There's like holders of the history of the witches there in DC. That's Fanny and Charles. He also, when he gets back to Forge, he makes a new friend with a character named Stu, which is one of my favorite characters in the book. There's a lovely character named Vadoma, who's like a traveling, I wouldn't say she's a Vatisse, which is different than a fortune teller, but she has card magic, like card magic. So she's a wonderful character as well. Like really picture her in the mind. And then there's another assortment of characters that are all up a bunch of lumberjacks that are very manly but don't take each other too seriously. We have Kofi, who's a dark African-born lumberjack. We have Rowan, who's an Irish-born lumberjack. Amasa, who's kind of an American kind of thing. But it's a very diverse set of characters, and I hope to make it even more diverse as the series progresses. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Looking forward for all those series,
yeah.
Victor. So, how does the setting contribute to the atmosphere of the story?
Well, that's an awesome question. The setting for it's kind of has two settings because, of course, they take John is sent south to kind of find Sam and bring him north. So you start out with these two settings: one in the north, the north woods, if you will, and then one in the south, kind of on a plantation kind of setting. So those are the two things that kind of these two worlds apart, if you will. Um, the southern setting, of course, of the United States has a history, and we give a nod to that history without diving too deep into it. You can't ignore it, of course. And then the woods in the north for sure have a feeling to them. I'm not sure where you grew up or anything like that, but in the woods of the northern U.S. and northern Maine, where I grew up, when there's snow on the ground, things can get really, really creepy in the winter when there's no leaves on anything and the trees rub together in the freeze and they squeak and make all kinds of noises. So some of this setting is born through through those sounds and that experience of being in the north. So yeah, I would say the setting of like cabins in the woods, of darkness, of northern lights, of all those things. I try to find a way to like incorporate the natural phenomenon that's going on into the magic that's happening in the story. Like the Northern Lights kind of reference when there's some magic happening, or like one of the things that happens with the witches is as they step in the snow, they the snow melts, so they only touch the earth. They never touch the snow. So there's a lot of fun things that I tried to incorporate with like the magic of the town and the magic of the people. So I'd say that's how the setting informs the story, as well as the idea of being cold and that getting you inside and the internal kind of conflict that that creates. So yeah,
So, Mr. Max,
yes.
what is the significance of the title Moonshine Path of the
Oh,
Raven?
that's a great question. So Moonshine is going to be the name of the series. Path of the Raven is the name of this book in the series. Um, but Moonshine is coming up. I suppose I can give it away on your podcast. We'll see. It's a sort of giving away of the bigger premise of the book. Moonshine is in reference the moon in general is in reference to the fact that there are werewolves in the book. So that's part of the fantasy. If you look on the cover, which I'm sure you've shown a couple times, you can see his feet kind of his shadow on the cover kind of goes into a wolf form. So of course the full moon is in reference to that. But coming in the future, in the next books, there's going to be quite literally the running of alcohol during the there you go if you scroll down or see how his feet are part of a wolf there, so that's we're nodding to what's going to be happening in the book with that. Our cover artist Tim Byrne was great to come up with that was something that he came up with after he read the
Mm,
book, and yeah, we loved it. We thought it was a great significant way to kind of you do a double take, you're like, wait, that's more than a shadow, that's a cool thing. So he did a great job with
yes,
that. But in the coming
truly.
books, what I was starting to say is it's kind of a play on words because I can't resist a good dad joke, that they will indeed be running alcohol from Canada down into the United States. And so
Yes.
that is going to be literally moonshine, the substance. And then moonshine also is a play on words for the werewolf. So it has a double meaning. So, we have to have a good kind of fun title to kind of go with it. I thought it was a really, really fun idea to go with. So yeah, it has two
Totally
meanings.
agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally agree, Mr.
Thank you.
Max.
Thank you.
And how does the protagonist's journey reflect personal growth or transformation?
Oh, sure. That's a great question. It's funny. Once again, I'll assume people have kind of read it or they're interested in it. That a lot of one of the things when one of my friends read it that they said that they really were surprised by was that as they got toward the end of the book, they realized that there wasn't necessarily a bad guy, right? So if you look at the way that stories are written, especially with traditional plot points, you have man versus man, which is one person versus another. You have man versus nature, which is man, like a person versus the elements or some other thing that's overcome. And then you have man versus himself, which is a person somehow transforming on their own. And this one for is mostly, for the most part, man versus himself. So Sam is the protagonist, but he's also the one that is facing all the challenges and has to change himself in order to become part of this new thing that he's becoming. If he doesn't, it could go very, very poorly for him. It could be a very bad thing. But but it's very much against himself. There are bad guys coming, but there's no specific bad guy. There are bad guys in this book, but they're not necessarily people that are against him, that are out to get him in that traditional kind of bad guy sense. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So yeah, this is very much Sam versus himself. Can he make it? Can he, it's can he live in this new world that he's being presented with? That's basically the idea.
So, what the cultural or mythological influences can be seen in the story?
Oh, that's great. That's a great question. Culture for sure is. I'm trying to open up that window a little bit because the idea is that I wanted to have witches and their jacks, which is their wolves, to be part of many different cultures. And the fun part of that is learning about like what are witches like in Ireland versus what are they like in the U.S. versus what are they like in Africa versus what are they like in India? Like what is the typical magical culture that many different cultures have? I have very limited experience with that sort of thing, but that's part of the research rabbit hole that I got to do when researching the book. So a little bit for this book, but more coming for sure, where we get to learn about, I guess, essentially magic or folk magic systems in different cultures. So in this book, it's very much informed by a little bit of Southern culture, like a touch of voodoo kind of stuff, because that kind of bleeds into Southern U.S. culture, but also very much New England culture, traditional healing herbs and spices and things like that. And how do they inform the spells that the witches make, especially the words they use. I love rhyming. I love good lyrics and things. So we spent a lot of time making sure that their spells were very, like their first spell that's cast in the book still makes me very happy that we phrased it this way. But the first spell is 4 stanzas long, and it calls in old spirits to help her make this super powerful transformation. And it's since Gilgamesh, your song was sung, from silver moon to silver tongue. Here a blade to cut the skin. From these words, the spell begins. It's just like, oh, that's really good. Like to do the deep research to figure out what that takes to make sure that the magic in the book feels grounded and deep and isn't something that's like super super fluffy, if you will. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Truly, truly amazing story. Thank you for sharing to the
Of
world.
course, of course.
So, Mr. Max, what will be your advice for those people out there who want to write their novel?
Oh, that's a great question. Advice for people wanting to write their own novel is, of course, to start.
Yes.
It's the great thing now about publishing is that you don't have to wait for anyone to publish your book. You can publish your book and put it out there, and you don't necessarily have to submit to publishers. You can publish it right on Amazon or Ingram Spark or any other site. Um, but I would say, getting a good outline of some kind. Save the Cat is one. There's a book called Story by Robert McKee that's really good, talking about story. There's just your basic 3-act structure, studying a little bit of that. And don't be afraid of rewrites. Interesting enough, when I was writing my book, I'd read about other people's books, and they went through 3 or 4 drafts, and I was like, 3 or 4 drafts? Like, I've been through 15 or 20 drafts, So not being afraid to rewrite. I have a whole pile of pages that were good writing and good ideas, but they just didn't fit in the book. The kind of the kind of rather aggressive people who are into editing will say, don't be afraid to kill your babies, because you have these babies that you have in the book that you want to keep. But you have to let go of them often. So as far as advice for writing a book, I would say, it's funny. There's 2 ways to write a book, because one way is to kind of outline everything and kind of build to the outline. And the other way is more like a discovery writing, where you kind of like discover where this goes on its own. And, you kind of do a mix of one or the other often, but some people tend to be one more way than the other. But I would say, just start writing. And the way I started this book was to make myself write 2,000 words a day for a whole month. And after that, you have a good 60,000 words. Then you can decide, like, where is the story going? What's good about these words I've written? Do any of them make sense together? Some of those days I would write something that was totally made sense from a plot line. Other days I would write something that would be a bunch of history that maybe one paragraph would make it into the book. But at least it gets the wheels turning for 30 days or so to really get you in the mode of, like, I'm creating something super cool, and for my case, magical or whatever else. But having a certain number of words, or even any words per day, would be a great way to, even if it's just 100 words or 10 words even per day, like, that's more than yesterday for a lot of us. So that's how I would say to get your book started.
Yes, people, start now and stop procrastinating.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
If you have the passion to write, write, and share
Yeah.
to the world.
Yeah.
And thank you for your advice, Mr. Max. So, what will be your short term and long term goals in writing?
Short term is get this book to sell. I want this book to sell, of course.
Yes.
Long term, I have this, like I said, this series I need to finish. I have a couple ideas for some, like, middle grade books, like 10 to 12-year-old books. Some kind of based in what this world is, some in its own world. And then I have a couple of nonfiction books that I think would be very, very powerful if I could actually get them out. It'd be super, super fun. Yeah. So,
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Max, and
all
looking
right.
forward for more series of your novels.
All right.
So, what lessons or messages does Moonshine Path of the Raven convey?
Sure. What I'm hoping to convey from this is, number one, adventure. And number two, I'm trying to use fiction to introduce ideas um, of good masculine upbringing. A lot of the world, or at least in the U.S., we often talk about toxic masculinity is kind of a thing in the zeitgeist, and I don't think we have a lot of. We have plenty of examples of what that is, and I would love to have more examples of what positive masculinity is. And it's my hope that Moonshine can both be a novel by itself, which is just fun to read, but could also, if you wanted to dive a little deeper, could be taken apart, and you could see some very wonderfully both traditional and forward masculine and feminine roles of society, of a story, of how we could all get along a little better and celebrate the gifts that we all bring to the world. So that would be kind of the philosophical goal of the book, I'd say. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Let's celebrate Moonshine, the Path of Raven. So, how do the characters' choices reflect broader moral or ethical dilemmas?
That's a great one. There's actually toward the last 2/3 of the book, Stu, one of my favorite characters, he talks about one of the codes that the characters have in this book, and that's that they always tell the truth. They don't lie. And we'll find out later that, lying actually weakens the magic, and that's why they don't do that. And then, uh, the follow-up question that Sam has for that is, well, how do you keep the secret about like all the witches and everything? How do you keep that secret? And Stu says, well, you can keep a secret without having to lie. And I like the idea of, what if you lived your life and everything you said was truth? Not that you have to reveal everything about yourself every second. You can always say, I'm not comfortable sharing that, or it's not my place to say something, as opposed to holding a secret, as opposed to lying and saying, I don't know. You're like, well, that's really not my place to say. So that philosophy I kind of like as a challenge to people who who read the book, to be like, wow, could I actually live that way where everything I say is true, where I'm not lying about anything? I think it's a wonderful challenge to live by, So yeah, that would be one of the big kind of philosophical kind of underpinnings that you mentioned, as far as like, of the world, that would hopefully people will notice and take away from it. It's a quick comment in this one, but it's going to play more into the next books for sure.
Looking forward for the second book, Mr. Max.
Thank you,
So,
sir.
are there any major plot twists or surprises in the story?
Yeah, there's a pretty good surprise. I'm not going to give it away, but there's a pretty good surprise.
Spoilers.
Yeah, exactly, totally. It's enough of one that I feel like if I say it, I'll be giving away a good chunk of the book. But I like to think that there's a little twist that kind of that surprises people, that most people that I've given the book to, or that have read the book so far, who are communicating with me, are like, oh, I asked if they saw this certain part coming, and they're like, oh yeah, no, I didn't see that coming. But at the same time, it makes sense. They're like, no, I see why it had to happen a certain way, but at the same time, it is surprising. So that's kind of, I think, the perfect way to have a surprise in a book, is to have it make sense. And when you look back on it, you're like, well, yeah, of course it had to be that way. But in the minute you're reading it, you're like, wait, what just happened? Oh my gosh, So yeah, there's a couple little plot twists in there for sure.
Yes, let's read the book too.
Yes,
That's awesome. So,
perfect.
Mr. Mac, before we wrap up our discussion for tonight, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, in its fifth season, People Fifth Season, which have Alessandro, one of the executive chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Please do listen.
Awesome.
Yes, please do listen to our latest episode. We are reading our letter senders all over the world.
Sweet.
And yes, Food 101, wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Max, what makes Moonshine, Path of the Raven, unique among other fantasy or adventure stories?
I think it's unique in a couple ways. Number one, we have kind of a hard magic that's based in reality. It's based in what is present day, but a retelling. So it could almost be historical fiction in that way. So it's not super fantastical, where we're in a completely different world with different rules. We're in this world. We're in a part of history that is going to play out properly in the historical context, but we're adding a magical element to that, which is super fun. Um, like I said before, it's a little bit based a little bit more in the masculine world, which I guess isn't super unique. I mean, Harry Potter's a thing; he's a boy, but I think books for boys is very important. Books for girls are important too,
Yes.
and I like the fact that this magic is hope as it moves forward is going to be multicultural. And I think that's very important in this day and age, that we can all celebrate our different cultures and how they can come together to literally form a stronger magic, as will be happening in this book. So I say that would be unique as well.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Max Shippee. Congratulations for sharing your debut novel to the world. And we are looking for more and more and more series to come. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book?
Sure. If you can support the book by buying it on Amazon, we'll include a link here. Um, if you want to look for it online, the website is readmoonshine.com. We'll also have some things up for teachers and for people who want to learn more. There'll be Teach Moonshine, so you can have little blurbs for your book clubs and things like that. But readmoonshine.com will be where you can find links, Instagram, all that kind of stuff.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Max Shippee because if you support him, as I said, more and more empowering series to come. So, Mr. Max, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel Lucas. I appreciate it.
More to come, people. See you soon.